Before we start, drop a quick comment with where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Keep that in mind as we step into a federal room where dead mail is supposed to end, and where one clerk learns that lost letters can be turned into brand new lives. Washington, D.C., spring 1909. The dead letter office sits 3 flights up. The windows are painted dull so no one can read names from the street. Rules hang where you cannot miss them. Open carefully, copy only what is required. Return valuables to the vault before close. Nothing leaves the room. Elias Hart signed beneath those rules his first day and has no interest in signing again for discipline. Elias is 25. Steady handwriting, low pay, 1 reprimand for correcting a supervisor's Latin. His station is identifying particulars, so any letter that contains proofs lands on his desk. Birth dates, immigration dockets, insurance stubs, bank forms, draft ages. He copies everything into a ledger meant to outlive everyone who writes in it. The work is dull until it isn't. If you control how facts are copied, you control which version of a life gets believed. At 9:10 a.m. on a wet Monday, the railway mail custodian wheels in a crate stamped "Found loose in transit." On top of 12 thick envelopes sits a dented tin with a cracked latch. The clerk at the next table jokes about cufflinks. Elias doesn't answer. He unties the envelopes and goes page by page. Envelope 1. A birth record wrapped around a baptism card. Names match, but not the latest city directory. 2. A naturalization certificate with a clean emboss but a torn corner. The date is 1 day off from the same man's marriage notice. 3. An insurance application signed with a middle initial that never appears again. By the 5th, he's not reading. He's sorting for pattern. The papers want to live together more than they want to go home. He opens the tin last. Inside, a glass negative wrapped in newsprint, a visiting card from a Chicago photo studio, and a brass key filed thin at the shoulders. On the card, tiny notations: ear 7, left, chin 3, brow 5, full face, 9, keep the scar. He tips the glass to the lamp. A face floats up, too even, eyes too centered, jawline obedient. It looks like a person built to satisfy a measurement, not a camera. A messenger in a railway mail cap appears at the counter with a reclaim slip. He's early. Same-day reclaims are rare. The wording is correct, but the purple stamp is the wrong shade for the division it names. Elias has handled enough slips to know colors by memory. Second signature, Elias says, calm. The messenger taps 2 fingers on the counter like a man on a timetable and says he'll return. His eyes count the distance from Elias's desk to the vault door. He leaves without the tin. Elias carries the card and glass to his supervisor, Mr. Kellum. Kellum dislikes problems that arrive wearing hats. He glances, calls the plate a photographer's trick, and points at a fresh chalk line under the rules board. War Department audit in 48 hours. Unsecured items at close will be cited. Log it, vault it, move on, he says. Elias logs and writes, vault. He does not stand. He checks the visiting card against the postal directory. The studio is real. A trade circular on the shelf carries an ad from the same studio. Composite portraiture for scientific and legal purposes. He sets the ad beside the glass and feels the shape of a new problem. Not forged jewelry, forged identity. At lunch, he eats on the steps and watches messengers thread their bicycles between carriages. A woman in a blue hat stops at the door with a cardboard tube, looks up toward his window, then keeps walking. He files that detail. Back inside, he scans recent bulletins. A Boston insurer reports a cluster of policyholders, all born on the same winter Tuesday. The War Department asks about descriptive cards that present unusual regularity. A New York bank flags a client with pristine references from a town recently burned. None says composite. All point toward it. 4 o'clock. The messenger returns, this time with a capless man in a good suit. The capless man lays down a business card. Special Agent, Railway Mail Division. The card is real, the stamp shade correct. The reclaimed slip is still the wrong purple. Crate misrouted through Chicago transfer, the agent says. Easy. We'll take custody. Our manifest shows Hannibal. No Chicago, Elias says. Just as easy. We maintain secondary records, the agent answers a little too quickly. Elias asks for the manifest number. The agent recites 1 digit off. Mistake or test, it's the same answer. Kellum is called. Audit week puts him on the cautious side. He signs for deferral pending audit. The tin goes to the vault, shelved, logged, barred. The agent's smile fades a shade. He leaves with the messenger and a promise to return with our copy of the manifest. At 5, the room thins to the sound of broom bristles and eraser crumbs. Elias copies the tiny notes into his pocket notebook. Ear 7 left, chin 3, brow 5, full face 9, keep the scar, and adds, Boston Insurer, Winter Tuesday Cluster, War Department, cards 2 regular, New York Bank, Burned Town, clean references. He pockets the notebook when the custodian throws the final bolt. He takes the long way home past the express warehouse. Chalk on the window reads, Next action, Saturday 10 a.m. Someone has doodled a small umbrella in the corner as if saving a seat. He sleeps poorly, wakes twice, and hears a sound he knows too well from mornings, the careful scrape of metal in wood. He lifts the corner of his shade. Across the alley, a narrow third-floor window at the vault corridor sits open a finger's width. A gloved hand slides a thin tool under the sash and works with patient pressure. The tool looks exactly like a brass key filed to try every lock without fitting any perfectly. He does not shout and does not run for a beat cop. He watches and counts. 3 seconds of pressure, 1 of pause. Repeat. He checks the clock and writes the minute on his wrist with pencil. Then he pulls on his boots and goes to meet the custodian at the side door, the way early clerks do when damp wood makes locks misbehave. The custodian arrives with a thermos and an old promise that he'll be early on audit week. Together they climb. The vault door is barred from inside. The window sash shows a smear of soap, a housebreaker's trick to quiet the slide. The custodian frowns and writes a line in the incident book. 3:17 a.m. Attempted window, bar secure. Clerk Hart, present at 6:05. Put my name, Elias says. If the tin is gone at 8:29, the ledger says, why I knew at 6. Kellum arrives early because audit week makes men early. He reads the entry, glances at Elias, and does not say, thank you. You're not on security, he says. You're on the ledger. I'd like to keep it that way, Elias says. At 8:32, the capless agent and the messenger return. The reclaim slip now has the right purple and a carbon manifest that does show a Chicago transfer. Elias notes, without smiling, that someone worked overnight to correct both problems. Before custody, Elias says, the audit clerk will countersign the release. Of course, the agent says, too polite. Kellum and the audit clerk walk the tin out of the vault, check the entry, check the manifest, and decide to hold until the countersign is in ink. The agent produces a letter on a trust company letterhead from Philadelphia asking that proofs be delivered by sealed pouch to special correspondents in New York. The letter is real. It moves the problem somewhere bankers must look at it. Kellum nods. "We'll prepare a sealed pouch," he says. "Our courier, our seal." The agent doesn't like that detail and signs anyway. Elias logs the plate and the card, seals the pouch with red wax, stamps across the tie, and writes the destination. He signs his name beneath. The agent reads the name, then the stamp, as if memorizing both. At 10:20, the front desk calls up for Elias. A quiet voice on the line does not introduce himself. "Your pouch is received," the man says. "If you're going to break this, break it where bankers must watch." The line clicks dead. At noon, the woman in the blue hat returns with the cardboard tube and a neutral smile. "Do you handle photographs found in the mail?" she asks the receptionist, who points her upstairs. Elias meets her under the rules board. "This came from a job printer's bin," she says, unwinding the tube an inch. "They called it scrap. It isn't." She shows an edge of glass wrapped in tissue and a visiting card from the same Chicago studio. On the back, tiny pencil, ear 5R, brow 4, nose 3. She lets him look, pockets both, and sets the empty tube on the counter. She is measuring the room, not donating evidence. "If it belongs to no one," she says, "I'll take it where it will be kept safe." "The Library of Congress likes why," Elias says. "We're better at where." "I'll start with where," she says, and leaves. At 2, Elias goes to the library anyway. In Prints and Photographs, he asks what composite portraiture means in plain terms. The librarian gives him the short answer. The Bertillon system, Bertillonage, classifies people by measurements: ears, brow, nose, chin. Composites average faces to produce types. If officials trust numbers, someone will learn to fit those numbers. He files the lesson. A foolproof method becomes a handbook for fools when enough money meets it. Back at his desk, Elias lays the 12 envelopes into a timeline. The names and dates hop Baltimore to Philadelphia to Camden and back to Newark like a plan laid across a railway map. It is too tidy for chance. He writes a single line in his notebook. "If you can buy the boring parts of a life, you can pass anywhere." At 4:15, the audit clerk asks him to write an explanation for holding a postal object past close. Elias writes, "Reclaim slip in manifest conflict, stamp shade off, number off by 1, attempted window at 3:17, incident logged, release by countersign only." He signs and feels for 1 second how close a neat signature sits to a neat dismissal if a detail breaks. He leaves late, circles the block, and returns to a room that smells like boiled cabbage. He splits his notes, one copy under the mattress, one behind a loose board. He dozes and wakes to the sound of a patrolman's footsteps on the street, the way a city measures itself after midnight. At 3:12 a.m., the careful scrape returns. Elias sits on the back steps with his notebook and counts it out. The bar holds again. 2 figures fade from the alley at different times, like people who rehearse leaving. He writes the minute, then writes the sentence he won't show Kellum yet. People willing to be patient at night will be impatient at counters. At 6:05, the custodian finds a tired clerk on the steps and a second line in the incident book. At 8:31, the capless agent returns to sign for a pouch he no longer controls. The sealed canvas leaves the building under the right stamp, toward a desk where a bank detective will have to decide whether composite is a word he wants to say out loud. Before Elias sits down again, he walks past the express warehouse one more time. The chalkboard still says Saturday 10 a.m. The umbrella doodle is still there. If someone is building lives out of paper, unclaimed trunks are the raw room. He writes one more line in his notebook. Saturday, Market Street, 10 o'clock. Then he closes the cover and keeps his eyes on the clock, because 24 hours just became a timetable. St. Louis, Saturday, 9:50 a.m. The Express Warehouse on Market Street runs hot and fast. A chalkboard by the door lists why trunks get sold to strangers. No label, no claimant, damaged, perishable, owner deceased. Someone has sketched a little umbrella in the corner like a private reservation. Elias stands near the back with his hat brim low and a notebook in his inside pocket. He slept 2 hours on the train. In Washington, the audit clock is already ticking down. At 3:12 this morning, someone tried the dead-letter office vault sash again. You do not read a room like this by faces. You read hands. A hand with an anchor tattoo only raises on trunks with brass corners. A hand with pinprick scars from needles waits for flat cases that ride under seats. Two brothers with the same jaw nod in turns at anything with stitched bottom straps. Traveler's luggage. A woman in a dark straw hat never lifts her arm. She tips the end of a folded umbrella 1 degree, and the auctioneer catches it every time. The boy with the bell rings once, and the room wakes. Lot 1. A hat box with a cracked clasp goes for small money. A red trunk stamped JMR fights up to $3 and stops under the anchor wrist. Lot 5. A cedar chest dies at $1.12. Then the runner plants a battered valise on the table, cord tied, express seals cracked but hanging. Chalk on the tag. Found in transfer, Hannibal. The umbrella tilts. Elias raises 2 fingers. The aisle pays attention because the aisle always watches the person who notices the umbrella. Bids climb in dimes. Elias drops out 1 increment early. The umbrella gets the valise for less than lunch. The runner doesn't carry it to the public release table. He takes it through a side door into the alley. That means a plan. You watch the wrong lots, a voice says at his shoulder, cheerful and accurate. The man offers a blank card that somehow says his name without ink. Hawk. I'm watching, Elias says. Then watch for straps under the case and wait at the bottom of a hat box, Hawk says, already half smiling at a secret they both now agree exists. Frequent travelers keep papers ready. Paper buys other paper. What does paper buy exactly? Elias asks. A name a bank clerk will approve between sips of coffee, Hawk says. He nods at a round case. That has air. The round case sells to Hawk. He cracks it a finger's width and lets Elias see. A tin cylinder stamped quarantine certificate, a rolled directory page with 1 family circled 4 times, a flat bundle tied with twine. He does not open the bundle. Photographs, he says. Edges rasped to hide the studio. Ordinary faces, ordinary moves. That's the trick. Who is we? Elias asks. People who know which words move which drawers, Hawk says. But you aren't here for me. The umbrella woman works like a metronome. Lap desk, writing case, tube. She refuses anything that needs a porter with an opinion. Close up, when Elias finally edges near, she is older than her hat suggests and has calm eyes that do not forgive sloppy questions. At the bell for recess, she lights a cigarette and stands half in shade by the alley door. First time, she says without turning. First time bidding, Elias says. Not first time counting hands. You bid small so I'd look, she says. That's either polite or reckless. Honest, he says. Elias Hart. She kills the ember with her heel. May Doyle, she says. If you use that name where it doesn't belong, you won't finish the sentence. I'm seeing a seam between luggage and ledgers, Elias says. I've seen a composite plate built to pass the Bertillon measurements. Also, I have an audit tomorrow morning. Composite faces are Chicago, May says. St. Louis is a suitcase problem. We build the life with paper and add the face last. How many lives? Elias asks. As many as the Saturday sales feed, May says. As many as a bank report can read without getting curious. Footsteps in the alley slow. The warehouse bull fills the mouth of the door, hands behind his back, badge bright, the practiced patience of a man paid to be unimpressed. Beside him stands a capless man in a tidy hat who carries nothing and notices everything. Buyer's card, the bull says. Elias shows the paper. The bull reads longer than the words require. Families come late, he says. If you find letters inside, you hand them over with the rest. People cry in this alley. Don't be why. He's with me, May says. That sentence works. The bull moves his eyes to the capless man. The capless man unfolds a release tag and holds it where May can read the stamp, but not the signature. We're checking a small mistake, he says, mild. A tag printed with the wrong pad. May produces the runner's tag from her pocket and holds it up next to his. The purple is off by a shade. You only learn by habit. Your pad, she says. A friend's, the capless man says. Will not use it again. He reaches to take the tag back. May folds it once and puts it away. He tips his hat like a man who just paid a small fine. His eyes slide to Elias for a fraction and file the face. Then both men step out of the alley without making it a scene. That one wasn't here for a trunk, Elias says. He was here to see if I flinched, May says. You didn't either. Good. They haul purchases 3 blocks to a second-floor room above a harness shop. The windows are papered. A long table holds labeled stacks separated by waxed string and wooden slats. Birth, marriage, death, passage, guild, school, service, insurance, residence, draft. Everything smells like paste and dry ink. Do not judge the nouns, May says. They were official before I touched them. She shows him the kit method, clean and fast. Pick a name that shows up twice in a directory in 2 addresses that could be a move. Pair it with a church that prints baptism cards on schedule and buys paper from a printer who sells offcuts. Add a shoemaker's dated receipt. Clip a portrait from a family album and rasp the emboss. Glue it to a blank cabinet card and press it overnight under heavy books. Insert a postcard to Dear Cousin from a town where cousins are common. Bind it tight, seal it once, then seal it again because banks like the look of effort. The middle must be dull, she says. Men ruin themselves in the middle because they want to sound interesting. How do you pick the name to run? Elias asks. We don't invent from scratch, May says. She opens a shallow crate and lifts a glass plate sleeve just far enough for him to see a composite face, aligned too well to be luck. Chicago sends plates and notes. They also float what amounts to a series. This month, it's Morton. If a bank clerk recognizes it, we retire it. If 3 cities clear it in a week, we ride it until Tuesday turns into trouble. The floorboard near the door whispers. Hawk slips in sideways, hat on wrong, like he put it on while walking. 2 men, he says. Not customers. One asked the barber if the shop upstairs keeps a ledger. One unfolded a release tag and said the word return like he was practicing. May closes the crate and slides it back. Back to the window, she tells Elias. You came to ask whether I have a 26-inch girth strap for a mare. I don't know what that is, Elias says. It's something a buyer says while I decide whether we're leaving, May says, and cracks the door. The bull and the capless man stand in the hall. The capless man holds a folded sheet with a bank letterhead creased to fit a pocket. "We're not accusing," he says. "We're warning. Newark is checking faces. Philadelphia borrowed a camera. If a man named Morton sits at a desk on Monday, you'll be disappointed." "We retired Morton yesterday," May says. "Not everywhere," he says, and lets her see the word duplicate on the sheet without the sentences around it. You know what that word does to clerks. "It makes them ask for the drawer," Elias says before he can stop himself. All three shift their eyes to him. He keeps his voice level. "And when they ask for the drawer, they ask for the index. And then the safe?" The capless man's smile does not change. "Keep him," he tells May. "He knows which words open which doors." They go. May bolts the lock and leans her head back against the wood for one breath, then moves. She pulls a narrow parcel from under the table and hands it to Elias. "Inner pocket. Don't drop it." "What is it?" he asks. "A copy I shouldn't have," she says. "Series Morton for the month. Cities, dates, ear numbers, who cleared where. If a bank detective gets half of it, he closes 3 towns before lunch. If the wrong man gets it, someone not built for jail goes to jail." "Why keep it?" Elias asks. "Because last winter a client called me from a telegraph counter with his last coins," she says. "A judge noticed a studio frame under a clipped photo. The rest was arithmetic. I kept a ledger to see which line cut him." Hawk watches the papered window. "We're collecting shadows," he says. May decides. "You want the seam between paper and money," she tells Elias. "You go to Pendry, Kansas City. He sells character and capacity. He writes routine like a hymn and files what won't pass. He's the turnstile." "Will he help?" Elias asks. "He'll help if helping lets him sleep," May says. "He's tired. Tired men tell the truth if they can pretend it was your idea." They leave by the back stairs. No cab, no names. Hawk peels off without waving. Union Station takes them into a varnished car that sticks if you sit wrong. May loops the sack strap around her elbow and closes her eyes without trusting sleep. Elias opens the parcel inside his coat just enough to read the first line. Morton, Camden, cleared. Morton, Newark, pending. Morton, Philadelphia, cleared. Morton, New York, registered twice. He shuts it and memorizes the rhythm instead of the words. Kansas City heat sits on the bricks like a second wall. They walk 6 blocks to a brass sign the size of a visiting card. Mercantile correspondence. Through the glass he sees a green lamp and a shadow that moves like a man who hates learning new names. May taps once and steps aside, so Elias will be the first face the door admits. The tall man opens. Tie tight, cuffs clean. He tries to close the door because no is faster than yes. "We have a report that cleared a man who borrowed a Tuesday," May says. "We want to know why it smells like work you didn't bill." He resets the lock with his thumb and opens the door a hard inch wider. 5 minutes, he says. Pendry. Inside, pigeonholes labeled by cities, not clients. 2 typewriters, a corner cabinet with a Yale cylinder and floor scuffs in front of it from being opened too often. May slides a quarantine certificate under the lamp, clipped marriage notices, an Aid Society ledger slip, and a cabinet card with the edges rasped to hide the emboss. "You verify references," she says. "You sell confidence to men who lend to strangers. Someone sells confidence to you." "I sell reports," Pendry says. "I don't buy anything I can't defend in court." "Not true," May says, without heat. She nods at the cabinet. You keep the things you can't defend behind that Yale lock. Pendry unlocks it anyway. He takes out a calf-bound ledger and opens to a page rubbed smooth by use. 2 columns, left ear, right ear. Next page, brow, nose, chin, scar. Names on narrow pasted slips. One reads, A.R. Morton. A client brought plates like this instead of references, Pendry says. He believed a face aligned to numbers would travel farther than a pastor's letter. I kept the numbers, returned the glass, and cleared the loan because the bank paid me for a routine answer. Who sold him the plates? Elias asks. A club above a watch repair on Halstead, Pendry says. Greek letters on handbills. Card index in the back. Map with pins where rail meets water. Elias sets a folded envelope on the desk and keeps his hand on it. I need your page on Morton, he says. No, Pendry says, honest, then looks again at Elias's neat suit scuffed by travel, at May's sack, at the way the request was phrased like a ledger entry. You're not a detective, he says. No. You're not brave. No. Good, Pendry says, and tears a page without wounding the spine. He slides it into an unmarked envelope and pushes it across. Enough for a banker to worry and a policeman to want a chair. What do you want? May asks. Break it where bankers must watch, Pendry says. If you hand this to a precinct, the club sheds skin and sells averages under another Greek letter by Thursday. He opens the cabinet again and takes out a single glass plate. The face is the kind that passes without being remembered. Carry this, he says to Elias. Say you're returning it to Mr. Jory. If Jory exists this week, he'll step out. If Jory is a hat, the man wearing it will talk until he learns something he shouldn't. Do they know we're coming? Elias asks. Yes, Pendry says without blinking. I told them someone would, and that he would know what a ledger smells like. I prefer rooms with witnesses. May's eyes say she heard the part where he warned the other side. Elias says, then we'll bring witnesses. Pendry's clerk appears with a bundle of mail. Pendry signs without reading and pulls one envelope with a Philadelphia crest. He reads flat. Our man Morton proved up in all particulars. Kindly extend credit. He sets it down like a weight. You asked how a man becomes acceptable, he says to Elias. He fits the cadence of paper. My report reads like the last 10. No one wants to be the first to say the pattern is wrong. Tomorrow, May says, we make them say it. Tomorrow, Pendry agrees. Back door, please. They step into the heat. May stops 2 blocks away and puts her palm against Elias's chest, not to push him, just to still him. He warned them, she says. Good. That means they'll perform, and people who perform in front of bankers leave footprints. Then we go make a stage, Elias says. Chicago, May says. Halstead above the watch repair. Lectures on Thursday. Indexing today. You'll carry the plate. You'll keep your hands where the clerk can read them. If anybody says series or study, you say you're between sittings. If anybody says Jory, you say you're returning what's his. And if they file my name, Elias asks. They already did, May says. Our job is to make them regret writing it down. Chicago, late morning. Halstead Street throws heat against milk-painted windows over a watch repair shop. Elias carries the glass plate in a sleeve the way a clerk carries a ledger. 2 fingers, steady, like it matters and isn't fragile if you respect it. May stays on the corner, pretending to compare pocket watches. She does not look up when he starts the stairs. He knocks twice. The door opens on a narrow-eyed clerk with clean cuffs and a face that says he dislikes surprises, but tolerates them if they bring glass. Elias holds the plate so the clerk sees value before he sees a stranger. "Contribution," the clerk says. "Returning a plate to Mr. Jory," Elias says. The clerk lets him in. The front room smells like developer and old rags. On the walls, composite portraits hung in neat rows, labeled with Greek letters like fraternities for men who believe arithmetic can bless a face. 3 workers bend over tracing paper at a long table, drawing lines from ear to brow, the way bookkeepers draw columns. An older man with a tidy mustache watches without appearing to watch. He stands when he decides to stand, as if standing is a tool. "Returning," the older man repeats, and the pencil in his hand stops exactly on a line. "From whom?" "Mercantile correspondent," Elias says evenly. "Plate kept in error. Address traced from a visiting card." The older man nods once and gestures with the pencil toward a back door. The door has floor scuffs in front of it, where heavy things moved more than once. "Mr. Jory isn't here," he says. "The desk is." He opens just enough for a view: a safe, a card index with finger-grimed handles, a railroad map with red pins where rail meets water, a telephone on a side table with a cloth under it to keep oil from scarred wood. Elias does not cross the threshold. He doesn't have to. The top index card reads Morton, A.R. The second card is pushed up just far enough to see Hart, E in neat letters. The older man watches his eyes and sees what he came to see. Nothing. Elias keeps his face boring the way a good liar keeps his story short. "Lecture on Thursday," the older man says, stepping back. "Photographic averages. Bring a sitter next time." Elias holds up the plate. "This belongs to your averages," he says. The older man takes it with careful fingers and checks the emulsion edge like a man checking a coin. He nods to the clerk. The clerk slips it into a wooden holder and writes a number in a ledger with columns labeled left ear, right ear, brow, nose, chin, scar. The numbers sit like a prayer. "We prefer contributions from sitters," the older man says, all civility. "But a fair sample improves the mean." "Then the mean owes me a receipt," Elias says. The clerk hesitates. The word receipt does not live in this room unless the room wants it to. The older man considers, then pulls a blank from a drawer, stamps it with a small club mark, and writes one sentence. "Plate received, added to Series 2. He does not write a name. He does not ask for one. Elias pockets the receipt, looks once at the telephone, and lets the room see him look. "If Mr. Jory returns before noon," he says, "tell him there's a duplicate file that needs closing." The older man's eyes narrow a fraction. "Duplicate is a banker's word," he says. "It moves drawers," Elias says, and leaves. On the sidewalk, May falls in beside him without asking. "They filed you," she says. "Second card," Elias says. "They wanted me to see it." "That means they're going to act like they're not afraid," May says, which usually means they are. They walk 4 blocks to a trust company branch where the lobby clock is fast and the blinds are low. A man in a gray suit waits with a ledger tucked under his arm, the way a policeman carries papers when he wants authority without a badge. He doesn't introduce himself. He hands Elias a page stamped special correspondence. Morton, and speaks like the room belongs to numbers. "Tomorrow," he says, "we ask to correct a ledger error and close a duplicate file. We say nothing about composites. We ask to see the index. We keep our voices reasonable and our hands where everyone can read them." "Jory?" May asks. "If Jory is a person, he'll decide not to be present," the man says. "If Jory is a hat, the clerk wearing it will go through a door we can follow." May nods at Elias's pocket. "They gave a receipt," she says. "Good," the man says. Paper is weight. When a room feels light, it runs. He slides a typed list across the counter. Top line, Series Morton. The second line has holes where letters should be, as if a typewriter ribbon skipped. Har. He taps the gap. Our informant says a second series is half prepared under another name, he says. If they move in front of us, they'll move to that. Who's your informant? May asks. Pendry on a day he likes sleep, the man says without apology. We're all tired of learning new names. He closes the ledger, but not his hand over it. One more thing, he says to Elias. I put in a call to Washington. Your office knows you're here. They know I carried a pouch, Elias says. They also know your name is in a club index, the man says. Be more boring than they are careful. That's how you go home with a job. May cuts a look at Elias that says, don't rise to any bait, even friendly bait. She asks the thing she cares about. If they pull the drawer we want, do we take it? She says. We take enough cards to close credit lines, the man says. We leave enough mess to keep them from claiming order. We give a receipt so a judge feels comfortable and a banker feels respected. The rest we collect from the watch shop alley when a runner gets nervous. He gives them a time and a door. 8 on the nose, he says. We'll bring a warrant we don't want to use. If they make us, we will. If they don't, they'll fix the right drawer by trying to fix the wrong one. They eat in a diner where the coffee tastes like a nail. May outlines tomorrow with the same care she used to build kits. Elias listens and counts the parts where a word can move a hand. He sleeps an hour in a room that smells like old varnish and streetcar dust. Before dawn, he copies Pendry's page into his notebook again, in a hand that would pass for typeset at arm's length. If the envelope disappears, the copy lives. If the notebook disappears, the rhythm of the cities lives in his head. At 7:42, they stand under the milk-painted window. May stays on the sidewalk, a customer who likes to be first when a watch repair opens. The gray-suited man waits half a pace behind Elias with a ledger that has clean sheets on top and a stamp block under them. A uniformed officer from the 12th Precinct posts himself a doorway down and reads a paper he is not reading. Elias climbs. The clerk opens at the second knock because that's what clerks do when the day looks ordinary. Elias keeps his hands visible and says the sentence they practiced. We need to correct a ledger error and close a duplicate file, he says. Series Morton. Front room or records, the clerk asks. Records, the gray suit says. They cross the main room past the Greek letter faces and stop at the back door. The older man is already there, pencil in hand, expression empty. Which file? He says. Morton, Newark duplication, the gray suit says, as if asking for a refill. The older man opens the door and lets them in just far enough to be polite and not far enough to be alone. Safe left, index right, telephone on the table, map ahead. The clerk moves toward the index. Drawer 3, the clerk says, reaching. Drawer 2, the gray suit says, mild. The clerk freezes a half-inch from the brass pole, the way a trained person freezes when a script goes off script. 2, he repeats, polite. Your outgoing letter referenced Series 2, the gray suit says. Let's close what you called it. The clerk changes drawers, pulls a stack of cards, lays them on the desk. Top card, Morton, A.R. Second, Morton, A.R. Third, Morton, A.R. Fourth, blank. Fifth, Mort. Torn. The stack looks like a deck someone trimmed on a train. We'll take the series for correction, the gray suit says. That's irregular, the older man says. Duplicate registrations are irregular, the gray suit says, and sets his ledger down, One clean sheet, a receipt already half-drafted. The stamp block waits under the paper like a small hammer. Elias keeps his eyes off the safe and on the telephone. Someone downstairs rings the watch shop bell, not the doorbell, the work bell, a signal that says, "I am busy when I am not." The older man hears it and decides not to hear it. Before the safe, Elias says, quiet, "Please write the plate number associated with Morton so my office can note it properly." He places the receipt the club gave him on the desk where the older man must look at it. The older man's mouth changes shape the smallest degree because receipts are a language he didn't expect to have to speak in his own room. The clerk spins the safe dial and opens to shallow trays of glass sleeves and a narrow calf-bound ledger. He lifts the ledger and opens to the page of ear numbers and other neat prayers. The gray suit puts one finger on the top corner. He doesn't move it. He doesn't need to. Down the hall, a door clicks. The officer in the doorway downstairs shifts his stance. The watch shop's rear door squeaks the way a door squeaks when a man with a drawer under his coat doesn't want it to. May steps into the service alley before anyone calls her. She blocks the mouth by the simple act of existing where a runner wants to exist. "Receipt," the gray suit says, and the older man finally writes, hand neat, habit stronger than mood. He writes the plate number he used this morning for the piece Elias surrendered. Elias reads each digit as it lands. It matches his memory, and that matters later when someone says, "It didn't." They leave through the side hall because leaving through the front would turn politeness into theater. In the alley, a runner with work clothes in the wrong posture tries to slide between May and Brick. She drops her canvas sack without looking and takes the drawer at stomach height as if it were a parcel that suddenly became hers. Cards cough into air. Elias puts his foot on the first falling tab and pins it like he's pinning a word to a page. The runner keeps moving because the first move is always forward, even when it's wrong. The gray suit kneels, repacks 3 cards, says 3 names aloud as if counting for the room. Morton, A.R., Marmot, J., Har. He pockets the torn Har, tab like a coin with 1 bite taken out. The uniformed officer takes 2 slow steps that change a corridor into a boundary without changing the speed of anyone's heart. No one shouts. That is the choice that keeps rooms survivable. The older man stands in the doorway, looks at the repacked drawer, looks at the receipt stamped with someone else's stamp, and makes the only move he can make that keeps him respectable later. "You'll give me a copy," he says. "You'll get 2, the gray suit says, and the stamp block lands on paper with the sound of a tiny door closing. They walk the older man to a room over a telegraph office where the phone is friendlier to banks. The gray suit dials Philadelphia, speaks 6 sentences, listens, and says, "Form B, Close Series Morton, note Newark duplication, New York double registration, verify new clients in person, photographs made in our rooms." He hangs up and writes the line for the minutes. Drawer recovered, index corrected, plate number recorded, series closed. Then he pulls a file from his own stack and lays it down in front of Elias. "Heart, E," the tab reads. The folder is almost empty. Inside sits a glass sleeve with a composite that is almost his face and not his face. "They had you to watch who was watching them," the gray suit says. "It's not a warrant. It's a mirror. Break it in your head now so you don't try to break it with your hands later." Elias looks once. He slides the sleeve back and takes his hand away. He wants to be bored more than he wants to be brave. "Tomorrow," the gray suit says. Washington will ask for a sentence they can put in the audit report. Give them this: crate from Hannibal, wrong ink, number off by 1, vault, attempted window at 317, sealed pouch to trust, club index recovered, series closed. Don't say composite. Don't say Jory. Say duplicate and drawer. May stands with the canvas sack on her shoulder and the receipt in her pocket. And Jory, she says. The gray suit writes 3 addresses on a square of paper and hands it to her. Rooms where men answer to that name, he says. 1 is a hat. 1 is a habit. 1 will be real until next month. May doesn't smile. We don't need his name, she says. We need the people who pay him. You'll get both, the gray suit says. Banks like cases with 2 names. He sees them to the stairs. On the street, a boy sells papers with numbers for the draft and a headline about a merger. No one buys a paper for news that will matter tomorrow in rooms with ledgers. Elias folds the receipt into his notebook, and for the first time since the tin in Washington, he lets the silence sit without filling it. Go home, May says. Say boring things. Keep your job. I'll be where hats become names. He nods. He has a sentence to practice, a vault to stand in front of, and a city that just agreed, on paper, to stop believing in a name it believed all month. Washington, Monday, 8:29 a.m. The audit team is already seated when Elias steps into the dead letter office. 2 men from the War Department, a railway mail examiner with a pencil that never leaves the paper, and Kellum with a face that prefers routine to oxygen. The incident book lies open. The sealed pouch ledger sits beside it. The custodian waits by the vault with his key turned to ready. Begin with the object retained past close, the examiner says. Elias keeps his hands visible and his sentences short. Crate from Hannibal. Reclaim slip with the wrong stamp shade. Manifest number off by 1. Deferral pending audit. Attempted sash at 317. Soap on the window. Bar held. Second attempt at 312. Bar held. Corrected reclaim arrived after dawn with a carbon manifest listing Chicago transfer. Sealed pouch prepared under our seal at the trust company's request. Names, the War Department man says. Not relevant to custody, Elias says. Relevant to a bank's review. The examiner looks up for the first time. And you know this because, he asks without asking. Because the bank's letter asked for proofs, and the bank's detective used the phrase special correspondence, Elias says. Both are words bankers use when they want to be responsible later. The custodian unbars the vault and brings out the tin to show chain of custody. The seal on the pouch receipt is clear. The time and Elias's signature match the ledger. The examiner nods once, a movement so economical it may have been a blink. Reclaiming party? The War Department man asks. Presented a corrected slip, Kellum says. We released nothing to them. The pouch traveled by our courier. The railway examiner tries one push. Why did a clerk get involved in a security matter? He asks, pencil hovering. Because my initials sit next to the ledger entry, Elias says. If the item vanished, my name would live on that line in red. I prefer black. The examiner writes that down exactly. Black preferred. He underlines preferred. He closes the incident book, satisfied it will be a paragraph that reads like procedure. The front desk rings. The receptionist delivers a sealed envelope with a trust company crest. Kellum hesitates a breath and opens it. Inside is a single sheet. Received, photographic plate, Series 2. Index cards recovered. Morton Series closed. Newark duplication noted. New York double registration noted. Please retain copy of enclosure for your audit. A second enclosure falls onto the table, a carbon receipt stamped with the club's own tiny mark and the words "Plate Received," added to Series 2. The examiner looks at Kellum and then at Elias, like someone checking a hinge that held. "Mr. Hart," the War Department man says without softness, "state for the record why the object was held." Elias recites the sentence he practiced. Wrong ink, wrong number. Attempted window. Deferral pending audit. Pouch under our seal. He stops. He does not use the words composite or club. He does not say Jory. The auditor's pencil makes a single line that ends with a period and not a question mark. "Very well," the examiner says. "File the report. Release the retained crate items that are not under question." Kellum exhales through his nose like a man who just paid a bill he'd budgeted for. He doesn't say "good work." He doesn't have to. He doesn't call Elias brave, either. He calls him back to his desk. When the room thins, the telephone at the front desk rings for Elias again. The voice is the same quiet man from New York. "Your side is done," he says. "Ours is not. If you want to see what a series looks like when it dies, be at the Pennsylvania station by noon. Bring nothing but your ledger face." Elias hangs up and looks to Kellum. "I'll be at my station after lunch," he says. "You will be back with sentences I can file," Kellum says, which is permission in a different tense. Philadelphia, afternoon. The trust company keeps a back office set aside for conversations that should be remembered. The gray-suited bank detective is there with the calf-bound ledger, the Morton cards, and a small stack of envelopes addressed to branch managers. He doesn't waste words. "We wrote Form B," he says. "Branches will refuse any Morton who breathes near a counter. We'll leak nothing. We'll let the habit die from boredom and inconvenience. Jory's people will move because moving is cheap." "Where?" Elias asks. The detective taps the torn tab he pocketed yesterday. "Har." "Somewhere that starts like this," he says. "They've half-built a lane? We won't chase the name. We'll chase the method." A clerk steps in and lays a folded sheet on the desk. The detective reads it and turns it so Elias can see. Tonight, Chicago. Lectures on photographic averages. The club moved the talk to a university classroom with a real door and a coat rack, as if prestige could be borrowed by proximity. "You wanted bankers to watch," the detective says. "Tonight, we let teachers listen." Chicago evening. A chalkboard at the front of the room says photographic averages in neat academic hand. The older man with the tidy mustache stands at a table with a lantern slide projector and a stack of glass. Students, a few bank clerks, a policeman who looks like a janitor, and two men who sell frames like they sell any fashionable thing. May sits halfway back, dressed like someone grading papers. She makes no motion toward Elias when he slips into a seat near the aisle. The older man clicks the lantern to life. A slide fills the board. A face that is nobody's and everyone's. He talks about the benefits of aligning features to learn types. He says the Bertillon system puts numbers where words fail. He says composite science helps cities identify vagrants and repeaters, and if one is candid, reassure the comfortable. He says nothing about banks. He says nothing about kits. He knows the room he has and the line he must not cross with a professor at the back. "Any questions?" he asks. A hand rises near the front. Not a student's hand. The capless man from the warehouse. He has borrowed a clean tie and the manner of a supporter. "Could a composite make a clerk more confident when references are thin?" he asks, as if he just thought of it. The older man weighs the room. Then he smiles with the kind of courtesy that sounds like science. A composite is not a credential, he says. It is a study. Clerks should seek paperwork that satisfies their institution. We provide knowledge, not permission. It's a careful answer with an exit both ways, and it almost works until he advances the slide one too far. The face on the board is the one Elias surrendered yesterday, averaged slightly, aligned perfectly. The gray-suited detective doesn't stand. He doesn't have to. The professor at the back clears his throat in exactly the tone used when a guest oversteps. The older man feels the room's temperature change and clicks to a lantern slide of a Greek letter, like maybe that was all he meant to say. A door at the side opens. A man walks in who could be Jory, or could be a hat. He is the age where names grow careful. He keeps his hat on because it lets him pretend he arrived by accident. Questions for after, he says, bright. There's coffee in the hallway. In the hallway, there is no coffee. There is a table with a newsletter sign-up and a drawer, this time a real drawer from somewhere else, with a cloth draped over it. Jory, or the hat with a man attached, stands behind it as if he belongs to furniture. Mr. Hart, he says, like he's greeting an old acquaintance. I'm sorry about your name in our index. Occupational hazard. Elias keeps his voice flat. Whose occupation? He asks. The humankind, Jory says, and his smile has sawdust in it. Some cities believe a number more than a story. We help stories pass the number. It's charity from one angle and business from another. You work in a place that believes a number too. Don't be offended that we read the same manuals. May is at the end of the table like she drifted there on a tide. She looks at the cloth-draped drawer and then at Jory. You move fast, she says. You already built the next lane. Jory doesn't look down. We always have a lane, he says. If bankers close one, we take the next street. The city welcomes order until order denies a customer. The gray-suited detective appears without ceremony. He doesn't show a warrant. He shows a stamped receipt and a typed letter folded to the line that matters. Series closed. Verify in person. He lays them on the table because paper changes weight when it's visible. You're not shutting us, Jory says to him. You're making us tidy. I'm making you slow, the detective says. Slowness makes prophet impatient. Impatience makes mistakes. Mistakes make rooms close their doors. Jory turns to Elias. Come with us, he says, as if the thought is reasonable. You like ledgers? We like ledgers. Your hands know how to file and not lose things. You saw how easily a bank believes a number if a page is neat. Why spend your life correcting the wrong side of the error? Elias sees the composite that was almost his face slide past his eyes. He sees the soap on the sash, the wrong purple, the slow pencil of the examiner underlining preferred. He pictures Kellum writing ugly sentences in neat script for the file that kept him hired. He keeps his answer as boring as a door. No, he says. Jory's smile doesn't change. You'll keep seeing us anyway, he says. We'll rename the street. We'll tell a teacher we're helping. We'll sell a banker a routine that looks like last week. May lifts the cloth from the drawer with 2 fingers. Inside it are blank tabs and a ribbon. No cards, no names. It's theater. The real drawer left through another door. You're less clever when you perform, she tells Jory. You leave both doors open. The detective doesn't chase. He takes the blank drawer and stamps a receipt for it, because that is how rooms are made, to remember what they would prefer to forget. He tucks the stamp away, not triumphantly, but like a man putting down a tool that did its job. The professor reclaims his classroom. The older man with the mustache says something anodyne about scientific discussion. The audience disperses the way people disperse after a sermon that woke no one. Outside, under the milk-painted windows, the air smells like developer and hot brick. Jory is gone. The capless man nods to no one in particular and disappears into the drift of a city that chooses to be busy as camouflage. "You have your hour," May says to Elias. "Go home." "Not yet," the detective says. He hands Elias a single sheet of onion skin. At the top is a sentence for an audit report. It is the same one Elias practiced, only cleaner. Under it is a list of addresses across 3 cities. At the bottom, a line in pencil. Har. Ask St. Joseph. Receipts twice. "You will be asked one question in Washington," the detective says. "Did you follow procedure?" You will say yes, and you will be right. More importantly, you will be believed. "And you," Elias asks, "do you close it or let it move?" "We make it cost more to move than it pays to stay," the detective says. Today, that is enough. Pendry meets them at the corner by accident or design. He looks like a man who slept and didn't enjoy it. "Bankers wrote their letters," he says to the detective without preface. "My page did its work." "You warned them," May says. "I prefer rooms with witnesses," Pendry repeats. Today had witnesses. He turns to Elias. "They will pick a new name. You will see it in envelopes weeks before a banker says it out loud. When you do, send a pouch the same way you did this time. Let us owe you boredom." Elias doesn't nod. He doesn't make promises. He says the only sentence he trusts. "I will keep the ledger right." May tilts her head like a challenge. "And when they write heart on a new card," she asks, "what do you do?" "I make sure they regret keeping it," he says, quietly. She accepts that for now. She adjusts the strap of her canvas sack and steps into the street without looking back, because some people are built to walk ahead of trouble and let trouble catch up only when it's tired. Union Station, night. Elias finds a seat by a window and sets the stamped receipt and the trust company letter inside his pocket notebook. He writes one last line, careful. Crate, wrong ink, number off, vault, sash, pouch, index, series closed. He closes the notebook and puts it under his coat, like a man protecting a child from a draft. The train pulls east. Washington will smell like paste and rules in the morning. He will hand the audit a sentence that reads, clean. He will keep his job. He will walk past the rules board and the incident book and sit down at a desk where dead letters end and some lives start again if someone pays for the privilege. He does not watch for Jory on the platform. He watches the reflection of his own face in the window and for 1 second thinks about how easily the room upstairs turned a man into an average. He lets the thought pass. He prefers numbers in a ledger to numbers on a brow. He prefers black ink to red. Somewhere between cities, the car lights flicker, and the composite he surrendered fades in his mind the way lantern slides fade on a cooling pane. The last thing he hears before he sleeps is the small final sound of a stamp landing on paper in a room where people were watching.